RevOpsAF, the only podcast for people who are RevOpsAF and want to learn all about things that are RevOps AF.
Our goal is to give the revenue operations community, that includes marketing, sales, and CS, for any of you not paying attention, the skills needed to accelerate their careers. Hello and welcome to RevOps AF, the podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Camela Thompson, and today I am joined by Sonia Chawla. Sonia, please tell us a little bit about your background and why you're RevOps AF.
Thank you, Camela. You're right, I've said that a few times. RevOps feels like my first professional love. I've been in this space for close to 15 years, working with companies big and small, helping them set up and optimize their revenue processes, mostly in B2B enterprise setups. I've worked with companies as small as 4 million and as big as almost more than $1 million, close to 2 billion. So my sweet spot is where there's opportunity to build and scale. I'm an engineer by training and a business master, so I think very analytically in systems and processes that comes through, and so does my training as FP&A early in my career.
And we met at an exec think tank talking about what revenue operations is. I still remember one of my favorite quotes from you was that if you can't sketch out a workflow, you shouldn't automate it. And I'm like, we're going to be just best friends because those are words to live by.
You're right. And I've repeated them before that. People expect you, let's automate this and solve the issue. We're facing problems, we just bring some automation in. The challenge is, if you're not automating the right thing, you're just doing work which will be undone later and you'll have a false feeling of satisfaction.
So what popped into my head right before, when it comes to trying to automate things or even buy systems to solve problems, I think a lot of people are looking for an easy fix for a process or people issue that may not be related to systems. It just feels that way.
You and I just speak the same language. You're right.
Yeah.
You're right. It just comes through being in the operations space. A big part of any system implementation is taking the people along with you, whether it's getting buy-in, like you need top level buy-in to get the money to get a system. Then you need, if you're working me and you work with marketing or sales, you need people buy-in to learn the system, use the system in the way that you want them to use, right? There people can use systems in a way that you didn't think about or didn't intend.
All the time.
Yeah. So those are some of the non-glamorous or non-celebrated work of systems and automations that we don't think about.
Yeah, it's a perfect segue into our real topic. We're talking about data management and why it's so critical to implementing AI. So many people are jumping to using AI to solve their problems without thinking about whether or not they have the infrastructure in place. And would love to hear an example from you. I could think of a couple off the top of my head, but would love to hear like an example.
Sure. Before we step into what we can do with AI, a lot of the large language models or GPT outputs are probabilistic in nature, and we all have used this extensively. It's a baseline quality. If you're a subject matter expert, you look at that and you'll say, this is it. It maybe does the job of an intern and a first-year analyst, but there's a lot more context I can add with my knowledge. At least that's where the systems stand today, or things you want to correct or set up in an enterprise structure where you needed to talk to existing systems, follow some existing validations and things like that. The part we're discussing is, if you're using AI in a popular use case, can it do a lookalike analysis to get me my ICP, right? When you're doing that, you're likely using the existing data in your systems about your previous closed deals. If that data is not right, your data provider is not right, your mapping's not right, you will come up with something that's not perfect. The speed that it produces stuff is okay to get not perfect output, as long as you have somebody looking at it to improve that output before you spend money on the basis of that output. So it's great for research if you're getting outside the World Wide Web where there are multiple data sources and its comprehension speed is far better. But once you're getting to your internal systems and getting output based on your internal data, whether it's documents, whether it's a CRM, whether it's something, a data lake, if that data is not correct or not mapped, you're invariably going to get wrong out. Another use case could be which contacts or which are the buyer's personas in my deals. I mean, sales, again, this thing comes to my mind, which buyer personas buy. And if your contacts are not mapped to your opportunities, like very simplistic, and that happens to all of us because the process is pretty manual still in our systems, you will miss out on key information. Unless you validated that information with your sales teams or your marketing teams, there are people who were involved and not showing up in your data set, you'll have wrong output. And these are just very simple things where AI could go wrong without the right foundation.
And I think the examples you're using are excellent and that they are something that AI is really good at going after. They're a problem that an analyst could solve. Where I get really frustrated is when we have an executive or a team who believes that AI is going to solve a problem that we haven't yet attempted or done well with internally. So, for example, cold outbound. If our existing messaging isn't resonating and we're frustrated with those results, why are we trying to scale them rapidly?
The perfect idea of AI will give you some output and you'll try to personalize this output a little bit, tweak it here and send it to 1,000 people. You're basically bombarding people with messaging that is not resonating. This is slightly controversial, but you like me for my controversial statements, so I'm going to say this anyway. It's very tempting to use AI output. You have to realize that the cost of an AI output today is less than $100 a month per person. You're using it, the next company is using it, the next company is using it. Where is the differentiation? If all my content is AI generated, where is the differentiation?
Yeah, I get pretty frustrated too because it's a chicken and the egg. We're not addressing the root issue in a lot of smaller organizations that haven't found product market fit. Instead of doing the hard, non-scalable thing of really talking to a lot of potential customers and our ICP and figuring out what our messaging should be, we're trying to throw AI at it. I haven't seen it end well yet. Maybe eventually it'll figure it out for us, but I think we need to address the elephant in the room, which is oftentimes the bad data behind all of this. So now that we've identified this giant problem with trying to throw AI at a problem or a data set that isn't fixed, let's maybe simplify this and go back to figuring out our ICP. What are ways that you recommend RevOps professionals assess the data and approach fixing it? What are some things they should be thinking through?
Let's break into two parts. Right? Before jumping the gun to AI, it's very tempting because it's the hot topic today and we all need to learn how to use it very effectively. I'm a strong proponent of it. But I think, as I said in my automation, you need to be able to find that out on your own before you scale it. And that's true for your ICP data too, which means depending on your company size, whether you have 200 customers or 10 customers, getting a fancy data tool is not the answer. The answer is exactly what you said. Talk to your customers and figure out what use cases are, and then maybe even hand populate what are the key firmographic data. You really don't need a big data tool or AI tool in this scenario because you're still figuring out what business problem am I solving, what scale I'm solving for, and probably somebody can spend 2 hours on the internet and populate the firmographic data for that 10 customers. And then you need a marketer or a customer success person to spend 30 minutes with each of your key buyers or users to figure out what business problem is getting solved. Get that information to your messaging team to craft, personalize your next 25 or 50 pursuits. The answer there is not automation, not at this scale, not at this time, because every nugget you get from customer at that point in time is gold, and you don't want it buried with an LLM that summarizes and brings you very abstract information. When you're working with another company, you really need a good quality data provider that is providing you the firmographic, demographic data. If you have product set, you're probably getting insights from the products and what features and products are getting used. And then you are using spreadsheets or data lakes or analytics providers to do a regression analysis, in some cases a conjoint analysis. You can do all kinds of statistical things to find out what are your win probabilities, what's your customer cohort made of and what kind of win probabilities you have. So I see more predictive modeling on a scale where you have Maybe I can say the revenue is not the right indicator. I still think the number of customers is the right indicator. It'll be very different for an SMB with 100K tickets, 10K or 5K ticket size versus one of my previous companies with 250K ticket size. It's a very different process despite what your revenue model or revenue size looks like.
I agree so much. I think the thing that makes companies excellent at anything go-to-market related are the things that don't scale when you're a smaller business. Customer interviews are a great example because the data often tells us what isn't working. It can't always tell us why. Talking to people is often very necessary. If you have 20,000 clients, you've probably figured a lot of that out. But even if you have 100 clients and things have suddenly changed, your market may have matured. Something may have changed in the market conditions, and it's still a good idea to talk to people. That's so smart. For small organizations, you gave a very strong argument for just doing the hard work and talking to people. For larger organizations, you mentioned some data providers, and I think you touched on some consistent things that help us identify what a good profile looks like. Are you comfortable talking about specific data providers or things you should be evaluating in those data providers if you're a larger organization?
Let's talk about how instead of the what, because who or what sometimes depends on the segment that you're talking about, right?
Oh yeah, healthcare is pretty niche and has specific vendors.
Niche. Climate is pretty niche. Really high tech is pretty niche. Then if your geography, North America versus Europe is pretty niche. Maybe the how and how do you test that? Maybe small sample testing of once you figure out what your winning criteria looks like, you have reasonably, a statistical analysis need 30 clients, but if you're somewhere in that 100, 200 range and you're able to do some sort of regression to say, these factors is what my win rate depends on, right? Whether it's your number of employees, whether it's sector, whether it's space, when was the company started, whatever. Once you've identified 4 or 5 factors your target customers should have, you can use statistics. Then you can do testing. My marketing friends love to do this. Give them a spreadsheet of 20, 50 or 100, whatever number, and come back and see who populates it, and then who populates it correctly. That you evaluate your data providers. Or now you even have tools that get you instead of signing agreements with 5 providers, you can just sign with Clay probably, and then you can get to multiple data providers. That's the way to approach your data set. I think it's very dependent on your segment, your space, your geography.
Absolutely. Because I'm thinking through things like duplicate accounts and duplicate contacts. Some organizations use account structures differently, or they sell into mega corporations with a bunch of different subsidiaries and try to figure that stuff out. So there may be reasons for duplicates, and they may not be true duplicates. We've talked a little bit about looking at demographic information, how these systems vary based on the niche you're serving. Are there other areas people should think about? I know you mentioned making sure that customer data is clean. Could you expand on that just a little bit more as just baseline stuff people need to do?
When I think about customer data, once you've identified which characteristics are important for me to identify which customers work for me, that's what I will focus on your data provider, right? Since I have my finance friends depend on us, your CRM should be configured correctly for billing information, pricing information, renewal information, which you don't need from external providers. You just need your systems to be set up right, your internal flows and systems talking to each other properly and passing information is the key. That's what I think is from your customer cohorts you need. Once you've identified the right data set that comes out from external data sources, your data vendors, get those from there, but make sure your internal flows between systems are set up right. You touched on account hierarchies and how companies are set up. That's a full beast on its own.
Oh yeah.
Especially if your CRM systems treat them, how well your CRM systems can handle them, and there are HubSpot versus Salesforce. They treat them differently, and then Their integration, you really need to massage and coax to get things from one to the another. So we can probably have a full architecture session. I'm not even touching that right now.
Yeah, I don't blame you. For people who haven't dabbled there, a lot of our marketing automation systems are hardwired to combine contacts based on email addresses and things like that. If you have a complicated account structure and intentionally have multiple records, if you're not very cautious, things could just disappear one day. Account hierarchies, even in systems that handle them well, like Dynamics and Salesforce, the reporting is still quite limited unless you're using external tools. It's tough to make generalizations. I try to, though, because I know a lot of people listening to the podcast are fairly new to revenue operations. And I want to give them some places to start. But
okay, fair enough. Let's try then. And as long as your listeners take this with a pinch of salt and evaluate it, their situations.
The right answer is always, it depends.
Yeah. The reason I'm speaking so much from heart here is I tried to unravel this HubSpot and Salesforce thing in a most recent go-to-market project. We exactly had the customer segments that we were talking about, big multinational corporations selling to their international headquarters. North America has a different buying entity, AMEA has 3 different buying entities, and APAC has a separate one. We were getting our leads inbound from HubSpot, which is mapping everything. So we had to unravel that integration between HubSpot and Salesforce to figure out, even if this lead, HubSpot will route it to this parent entity, but this, and I didn't have it my last time, but if somebody has access to it, great. If you can see the source of the contact and then route it based on that, and write, in most of my previous roles of write long lead routing algorithms based on who owns which account. That was a good 6 months project in itself, that plus a few other things.
Yeah, it's interesting. They're both good systems. HubSpot does what it needs to do, but it definitely gives you an appreciation anytime you're dealing with any sort of marketing automation, how different marketing data is structured from anything we think about in the rest of the business, which is really centric around an account. So data problems abound. Are there other data areas you'd like to touch on? I think we're really doing a good job of tackling the different elements of accounts as it pertains to preparing for some kind of AI solution for ICP. Are there things you like to think through in terms of contact or person data? I know you mentioned relating them to the opportunity. Are there other areas you like to focus on?
The other, relating them to the opportunity and what information you can get about them. It's very basic to get their function, their title, which is what you would hopefully have. Then you feed it to your AI systems to say, who are my buyers, who are my influencers, or who are my champions. So the other thing, again, this is touches both marketing and sales, is their life cycle. Where are they have they engaged with you, whether at this company or last company? If your go-to-market systems or lead systems can tell you that. Have they changed roles to go and prospect into a new account if you have a previous guy going to a new company? Those are things I can think about contact data. Mm-hmm. And the other piece, and I know you'll love it, is how engaged. If you have a lot of repeat buyers and a huge amount of expansion, then of course, how engaged are they in your product, which is where your product insights come in, especially in SaaS, that's basic information you have. And so how engaged are they, or how often are they going in? And on that note, because most companies are focusing on renewals today, that's a very good leading indicator. Product usage is a very good leading indicator to your renewal information.
I think one of the things I like to encourage people to think through is educating CS and sales why the primary contact is so essential to flag. A lot of times that has to do with the ability to identify if they've left the company and automate alerts and make sure that they're retained, but also let the sales team know, hey, this person who really likes our product is going to a new company. There might be an opportunity there. I love you mentioned this earlier. You're really bringing the stakeholders in and educating them on this. It is hard to sell data projects. Are there other things you like to do to make sure they know that they're getting something out of this too?
Yeah, I think we can go back to our topic on automation. I can think of a couple of examples. The general idea is if you're getting to a data project, instead of selling in terms of data quality, can you sell it in terms of cost impact and tune your team on efficiency or what they don't have to do, right? I mean, let's face it, salespeople don't like to update CRMs, and I don't blame them. The more time you spend manually inside a system is the less time you spend talking to a client. In one of my previous roles, I remember, but once we had this primary contact identified, we made sure that every call, everything was auto-logged, and that counted towards their prospecting activity. So we were, there was a carrot and a stick. We didn't allow them to, the opportunities could not close unless there was a primary contact. There was a little bit of stick. But before we got to that stage on a long sales cycle, in a 6 to 9 month sales cycle, if you identify it early, we made sure all prospecting activity was correctly logged for them. So they don't have to answer a question of how many meetings you had with him. Were you prospecting to, or were you nurturing clients? Were you moving opportunities along? So that's an example of how do you sell a data project, or how do you sell something when you're asking people to do some manual work, something they're not used to.
And that's a great example of what you can do if you prepare properly. If you are noting who the primary contact is, there's a lot of interactions that can be automatically logged and take a lot of the weight off the sales team. If your company's at a stage where you can invest in something like call recording software. Even if you're not there yet, preparing for it is super important.
So here's my take on the subject. I think call recording is becoming basic. We know of the big providers. I'm a big fan of Gong. Their competition Chorus came around the same time and probably got acquired by someone if my memory serves me right. But my point here is call recording is now basic. The number of tools in the market that do that, I can count like 10 on my fingers if I start speaking about them. So to your point, if your company is that stage, I feel like if it's somebody charging me $5 a user to record a call, or Fathom is providing you 10 free meetings a month, Otter is doing some free, there's some Read.ai, there's attention that's focused on sales. My point is any company of any size today can record calls without worrying about the cost, and they should be. That's my spicy take right now.
It's a good one because there's so many things I've seen done that are just smart. Like if you're having meetings and you have an open opportunity and the salesperson's having the meetings, why not auto-associate all the people on the call with that domain to the opportunity? Or use the AI summary to maybe update next steps. There's just so many different things you can do. Why not?
That's another that's why I said this is so cheap. Another project I did in my last company was we used a not so expensive tool for call recording. And for our velocity sales, a big part of it was filling up Salesforce and writing follow-up emails. For a rep closing almost 60 deals a month, that's a lot of work. So we automated all of it, and the response was amazing. That's why I think any company of any size should invest in call recording. It's super valuable.
And for the marketers out there, if you analyze that data, you can get a ton of competitor intel, the words your customers are literally using. It's so useful. Sonia, thank you so much for the hot takes and for being on the podcast. Where can people find you to network?
The best place to look for me is LinkedIn. I'm fairly active and I have a very easy to find user. It's Sonia Chawla and SONIACHAWLA and LinkedIn/in/Sonia Chawla. So it's pretty easy to find.
Thanks so much for tuning in to today's episode, everybody.
For more great content like this, join our community at RevOpsCoop.com and check out the links provided in the show notes.
Keep it RevOpsAF, y'all.